I actually heard about courtship as a teenager, and it made a lot of sense to me at the time. God planted that seed in my heart, and it really stuck, and I was thankful for that. And Dave already went over this, but I'm going to be repetitive and say it again. I'm going to say what my understanding of courtship is. And this is how I understood it as a young man as well. A young man asked the father for permission to court his daughter with the intention of getting married. Dave said that already. The father and daughter have to agree with input from mom, of course, right? And the intention is to see if you're compatible for marriage in a God-honoring way. And maintaining your purity through the process, right? I mean, there's tons of verses that say to be pure, right, in your walk with Christ. Jesus said looking at a woman to lust after her is the same as committing adultery in your heart. So it's a very high standard, right? I mean, if we're just lusting, we're committing adultery. Matthew 5:28. 1 Thessalonians 5:22 tells us to abstain from the appearance of evil. And you know, the courtship model gives you the opportunity to have a lot of accountability, whereas dating and going off on your own, potentially sneaking around, you have a lot of opportunities to sin. Paul also admonishes Timothy to treat younger women as sisters with all purity. So in my opinion, courtship helps facilitate obedience to Christ. And it is ideal if the parents are involved in the process to provide guidance and feedback and also for accountability. And I know that's an ideal situation, and that's not always going to happen because my parents weren't involved, right? They didn't really care about a courtship model or anything like that. If you're compatible, you get married. If not, then the great thing about courtship, right? If you're not compatible, you avoided potentially life-altering decisions, right? Because you kept that purity, you had accountability through the process. Now I'm going to talk about my experience. So I took John to dinner and asked him if I could court Christina. He said yes. I was thankful for that. And of course, Christina said yes. I was very thankful for that. And then after that, I went to their house regularly to get to know Christina and her family, which was great. I'm very thankful that John and Barbara were so involved because they made opportunities for me to come and be a part of their life, right? They didn't just say, hey, go and figure it out by yourself, right? So thank you, John. We were very compatible by God's grace. So eventually, as we went through the process, I asked John if I could ask her to marry me. And John checked with her, and she was ready right at the same time, by God's grace. I think 3 days before she had made the decision. So God's timing was in the entire process. I was very thankful for that. One bullet point I skipped here too. I was meeting with John on a weekly basis to touch base on how things are going, and I appreciated that. So he could kind of gauge how the process is working itself out, right? And I'm sure he was having a lot of conversations with Christina too. The other thing that John did that I appreciated, he was giving me a lot of marriage pointers. Well, not a lot, but some pointers, you know, because he'd been married a lot longer than I had, right? 20-something years compared to 0. So that was good. I took notes in my notebook at the time. So yeah, he checked in with Christina when we were ready to get married. She said yes by God's grace. And then I coordinated with John to propose on Cannon Beach, and she said yes. So again, the family was involved, right? It was a great, like a celebration time for the entire family. After we were engaged, one of the big things that we did that really was watching Love and Respect as part of our marriage counseling. There's a few that haven't, but I would highly recommend it for premarital counseling because it provides great insights to how women work versus how men work. And that was very beneficial for me because one of the things they bring up is helpful to recognize what the crazy cycle is and how to avoid it, right? So just a little teaser there for you. Another thing too, we did set up some ground rules at the beginning of the courtship. As a man, I didn't want to touch Christina or any woman before I was married. just to help myself avoid temptation, because, you know, as a man, we're very visual. This is reality. And if you start touching, that just takes it up a notch, and I didn't want to go there. And I know it's going to be different for everyone. I'm not saying everyone has to do that. But I would say that it's good to discuss between the families what makes sense for your situation as far as ground rules, if you decide to do the courtship model. Overall, I see courtship as a great alternative to traditional dating to help mitigate temptation and sin. It's not going to get rid of all temptation and sin. It's still going to be there, but it helps mitigate it, right? It was also a great way to establish a good relationship with my in-laws, all of them, right? Because I was over there regularly. We were talking, we were getting to know each other. And they were getting to know me, right? So it was a good time. It's also a great way to learn pointers from your in-laws about your potential future wife, because obviously they've known her a lot longer than I did, so it was good. And for young men, I would say to take a father's perspective and ask how you want your daughter to be treated, and apply that same thinking during your courtship or dating, right? Because that was the perspective I tried to live with, because I didn't want to take advantage of any girls, and you know, I wanted to honor God through the process. And that's it. Oh, your turn.
I think that we ended up actually meeting at church while I was passing out political petitions, trying to get people to sign. In Gresham. Yeah, we were, it was very much in line with how I had expected courtship to work out. I had sort of expected that I would be doing things, I would be serving God, I would be serving my community, and eventually I would find a guy who was also doing those kind of things, and who was also interested in the same kind of things that I was, and serving in the same ways that I was. And he wasn't passing out his own political petitions. He didn't have his voter registration figured out, so he couldn't sign. So this annoying guy, I had to talk to him every single week, and I had made a commitment. I had been really convicted by God from a very young age not to spend time alone with boys and not to talk a lot with boys. So here's this really annoying dude that I have to talk to every week for 6 weeks. But God used that, and it worked out really well. Because he was naturally a shy person, and I was already avoiding talking to guys. And then here God put this person, like here, this guy who's actually very politically active. He keeps up more with political news than I do, now that we're married.
There's a lot going on in the world if you haven't noticed.
There is. One of my favorite memories from courtship was when I opened the refrigerator. After he'd asked my dad if he could court me, my dad had asked me if I wanted to court him. I said yes. And then like 2 weeks later, I opened up the fridge and I noticed that there's like 3 bottles of my favorite juice in the fridge. And I was so excited. Like, wow, Mom, thank you for buying my favorite juice. I didn't even know. And she's like, no, Claudia's been bringing those. He'd asked my siblings what my favorite juice was. And then he brought one each week in his car, and he put it in the fridge without telling me.
Started piling
And it was just really touching, both that he was trying to win my heart in a very discreet and gentlemanly way, and that obviously my siblings approved. It was not fruit juice, it was cranberry juice. There was no pranking, no pranking involved. And since we're sharing our definitions of courtship, for me, my definition of courtship was that it was an effective battle plan to help me stay out of compromising or tempting situations, and to fight the battles when they were small, on the front of sin and lust in my own heart, instead of ending up all the way in the garden, on top of the boy, alone in the room, and then decide that, well, wait a minute, I need to stay pure and I need to not go all the way. I had people talk through that specific scenario with me in youth groups when I was a kid. Like, oh, by the way, once you're here, this is how you fight the battle. And I remember being very thankful that because of God using my parents to bring courtship into my life, that I already had a battle plan to stay away from that all the way part of the battle, and I was fighting it way over here. on the subject of feeling lust and looking at boys and not being all the way over on the ditch and then trying to get up out of the mud again. So those are, yeah, those are more. I think that's all I just.
So, quick question, how long did you guys court?
Was it 3 months or before we got engaged? Because we got married in 6 months. The courtship started and we were married 6 months later.
I think we courted for about 4 months, and I knew you for about 11 months before, because I didn't expect you to actually propose then. I was expecting you to propose 3 months later when we had been courting for 7 months instead of for 4 months.
She's counting the numbers. And you guys were 18 and 19 when this happened? Or
Probably
what?
read a book or something.
No,
It must be 7 months.
I was going through college, and I had already signed up for my next semesters of college classes when my dad asked me
Thank you
if.
for, thank you for
Yeah.
the compliment.
Okay.
I know I look very young.
No, I was 23, and you were.
I was 27 because we got married when I was 28, right on my birthday.
Nice.
Good birthday present.
Yeah. Well, I just mentioned that just because, you know, I think sometimes age makes a difference
Yes.
on how fast you
Oh, yeah.
move forward, but we can
Yeah.
ask questions about that later. Burley, do you want?